This podcast is sponsored by Communicate and Connect Counseling, where we have a team of therapists who provide individual, couples, and family therapy services, all tailored to meet the needs of military and veteran families. To learn more about our services, visit www.communicateandconnect.com. Welcome to the Communicate and Connect podcast for military relationships with your host, Elizabeth Polinsky, a military marriage counselor. If this is your first time listening to the Communicate and Connect podcast, please take a second to go rate, review, and subscribe to make sure you get all our future episodes. We also really want to know what it is you love about our podcast, and if for some reason you're not loving it, we want to know that too, because we're committed to providing the best quality content to help you improve your relationships. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Communicate and Connect podcast. This is episode 35 on the importance of identity in marriage with LaQuita Monley. So, LaQuita, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. I know that you were a military spouse for such a long time, and I'm really excited for the things that we're going to talk about, both with identity and like how you went about developing sort of your own identity as a military spouse and everything related to that. But maybe you could just start with kind of introducing yourself, who you are, what you do, that type of stuff for our listeners.
Sure. Thanks so much. I'm just excited to be here, Liz. This is going to be a great conversation because what I've learned over my short time period on the earth is everything we do in life hinges on our identity. So I'm really excited about this topic. But as for me, the way that I like to introduce myself to people is this, that I am a proud retired Army wife, mother of 5 adult children, and now grandmother of 6 amazing little people. My middle son, he and his fiance just had a new baby. So now we've added one more to the bunch and we have 6, and those roles that I've been blessed to be able to occupy as wife, mom, and now grandmother. I know now that they have laid the foundation that causes me to be effective in my roles as a minister, as well as a certified speaker, coach, trainer, facilitator with the John Maxwell team. So it just, as it relates to identity, that foundation, understanding the roles that I play and how they are connected to who I am is very important. So that's why I like to lead off with that I am. And I do the retired Army wife part because my military community is very, very precious to me, especially my Army community, because we have some challenges that other individuals don't have, especially as it relates to knowing who we are and where we fit, or should I say where we can stand out at.
Mm-hmm. I'm so interested to like deep dive into all of this. I think we probably have to start with like what is identity, and even starting at that level, so that way we can kind of build up to how these different roles have informed your identity and things like that. But how do you typically talk to people about what identity is and like why it's important?
I typically, so to get to, as an icebreaker, to get into that conversation, those questions I usually crafted based off of the assessment results. All of my clients, I work with my clients based off of their results from their DISC assessments. And because each person's personality is different, that gives me the time that I need to come up with the questions, because a lot of people don't really realize that they have no idea what their identity is. And they think it's the roles that we play or the positions that we have, when the identity starts at the very core of who you are. So, one of my leading questions is, can that person explain to me what their core values are?
Oh,
you
I
know,
love that.
and most of the time I get that pause, because if you can give me your core values, even if you haven't fully mapped out who you at least are on a good path. Going through that exercise with them, it makes it easier. So that's the icebreaker. And I found that the person feels less attacked, because if I just come straight out and say, well, who are you?
Mm,
Depending on where they are in their life, they can feel a bit attacked
yeah.
and shut down, and it makes the session not productive. And definitely they may not come back for another session, you know. So, and I also like to give them like a working definition of identity when they said, okay, like if they go to telling me things that they like, then I bring it back and say, okay, well, here, let me give you a definition of the word identity. Identity is the fact of being who or what a person or thing is. So, it,
Mhm.
depending on what object I have close to me, we understand that a pair of scissors are scissors. Scissors are used to cut things. Yes, that's what they do. But when you look at yourself, or when someone looks at you, who do they say that you are? You know, do you have that understanding? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I almost have like goosebumps. Like I really am digging this conversation right now because so what I'm hearing you say, if I were to try to summarize it, is that identity is who we are, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a little bit more stable. It's who we are at our core, and that
Yes.
involves things like our personality or our
Yes.
core values.
Yes.
It's very different than a role, because a role could be a student, a wife, a daughter, a parent, but these change over time. And my
Yes.
identity is who I am, that is consistent across time, even though I change these different roles.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because here's the other part that we do eventually get to in the session is where we are when we discover our identity. Because as humans, we are designed to continually grow and stretch and mature. Like you said, those roles will change. Even how I approach different things will change. But at my core, I'm the same.
Mm,
At my core, if we're looking at, and now it is escaping me the name of the diagram, but it's like, you
okay.
know, your outward self, you know, who people perceive you to be, the person that you truly are, and then the person that you think people see you as,
Mhm.
right? But that core of who you really are, no matter how much personal growth and development that we do, and personal growth and development is fundamental, we only change a little bit from that model of the core of who we are. Those other, the other two change a lot, and they will change consistently. They will make drastic changes when we don't really understand who we are as an individual. So yes, as I grow, as I get older, you know, different aspects of my life will change. How I perceive the world will change. How I respond to the world will change. But it's still based off of the core of who I am. And
Mhm.
now it's our personal responsibility to take on that personal growth journey, to discover those things. And I like to lead my clients through that journey, by starting them out with, because I am a part of the John Maxwell team, I have the ability to give them the Maxwell method of disc assessment,
Okay.
and to start out with that assessment, and let's build and let's grow from there. Because, you know, depending on what assessments they've taken in the past, it could be called, you know, are you sanguine? Are you phlegmatic? Are you, you know, what are all of these things? But most importantly, what does that mean?
Yeah. So I'm actually not familiar with the John Maxwell thing that you do. Could you describe it briefly for other people who might be listening like me and don't really know what you're referring to?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So no worries. Disc, most people, well, some people will understand what a disc assessment is. The
Okay.
Maxwell method of DISC is just been tweaked a bit to fit his leadership model.
Okay.
But at the core of it, the disc does the same thing. So you have that dominant personality, which is the D model. You have the I, and I am a high I. And that I it's influencing. That's your overly charismatic, chatty people. The dominant individual. I don't really like that they use the word dominant, because depending on a person's experience, that could be very negative, when that's not really what it is. That dominant individual is the person who just readily accepts leadership,
Okay.
and they are very strict, very structured. They can get the job done. In crises, they rise to the occasion,
Mm-hmm.
because they have that ability to compartmentalize and respond without the emotion in order to bring a crisis situation and to de-escalate it. So you want to have that person on your team. You want to have an aspect of that. I just don't like the term dominant. So then you have your S personality, which they're stable, they're steady, they're a team player. They're that individual that, again, they bring that steadiness to the organization or to the relationship, where they love systems. Everything has got to go in its proper place, and it's got to make sense. And they love systems. And if there are no systems, they can create the systems to make everything run like a seamless sewing machine. And then you have the C personality. The C personality trait is a really good combination of, to me, of the S and the D.
Mm-hmm.
Because with that C personality trait, they want everything correct.
Okay.
So
okay.
And a person can be a combination of any of them. But in that, based on the answers that the client gives, we get a clearer picture of where they fit in that model. As we have that clear picture of where they fit in that model, we understand their communication style, how they like to receive communication, how they give communication. We also have an understanding of the types of individuals who they more easily naturally gravitate to, versus the types of individuals that kind of rub them wrong, if you can say that. And it also gives us a way to help them to understand how to properly communicate with the other personality traits, especially the ones who they don't just naturally gravitate to.
So DISC is this personality assessment that you use as a tool in your coaching to help people discover and learn about their sort of the core of who they are and develop their sense of identity, and then to be able to use that in a variety of settings, whether that's understanding themselves and their partner better, or understanding how they function in a work role or a leadership type of role, based on
Absolutely.
this identification of these aspects of their core identity.
Absolutely. And you said something really key there. We use this. So my husband and I are also Prepare and Enrich certified facilitators.
Awesome.
And we do,
So
we do, and
it's a marital program, right? Like, because not everyone will know who's listening. So Prepare and Enrich is a premarital program. Okay.
It is. It's a premarital program. And what we found, we were introduced to the program actually with our work with the chapel. And you can use it as a premarital assessment, but you can also use it postmarital as well, because they use scope as a way to, dig into the personality of the partners, of the husband and the wife.
Their like relationship assessment test that they use as part of the program. Okay.
As part of the program. And we found that by using that combination together with DISC and scope, it gives the couple a very clear map of who they are individually and who they are as a couple, and the work that we can do, like based off of those things. Because with the DISC, you get 3 graphs.
Okay.
And the center graph really lets you know who you are at your core, the aspects of you that are solidified, that they are what they are. The other 2 graphs show you where you can work, how you think people perceive you versus how they actually perceive you, and then who you really are. And we're able to then get a really good foundation set on personal growth and development based on the client's needs, based on what they say they want to achieve. Here's a sure picture of who you are. And these are some of the aspects that may or may not be causing conflict in your marriage, in your workplace, or even that inner turmoil and conflict when you're saying, I cannot figure out why I'm like this.
Mm-hmm.
And why do I respond like this? But, because that's a real thing. That's a real question that people have. And until you have had that work or do that work in a guided setting, it's really, really difficult, especially, and again, I do have favoritism to my military community, especially with us within the military community, because our life is so transitional.
Yeah, which is why I think this is such an important conversation, because if I don't have a sense of who I am and what my identity is, then I can easily sort of be consumed in my role as a spouse, and sort of like lacking my individual identity just in my role as a spouse or a parent. That comes up, but also then in my role as a military spouse who really has no say over, are we going to move? What's very little say over my career and how that progresses because of the moves, or even just like the honeymoon. Like for us, we had to cancel our honeymoon because of COVID. We got married and we delayed the honeymoon, and we were going to do it like the next year. And then COVID happened, right? And then he was supposed to deploy like 3 times, and each of those 3 times got canceled last minute. And then now he's deployed right before we move, right? And so there's the constant change, and the like, you make a plan and it doesn't work.
It's like, I was having this conversation, and I was actually, how do you do it? Resiliency is the key. And it's not something that let me say that you can be taught how resiliency works. But resiliency is like going to the gym. I can be taught how to properly lift a weight, but until I lift that weight, I have no idea what my personal response is going to be, how my body is going to respond. And as military spouses, our life is dependent upon our level of resiliency. And depending on how you look at it, fortunately or unfortunately, you can never truly be really prepared for that until you get in those situations like what you were saying. How do you bounce back from having no control? Absolutely no control. And here's the thing that we tend to learn as we go. Depending on what your husband or wife's rank is when you marry, the thought is always it'll get better the more rank that they get. And it's not until you achieve that next rank or that different position where they are sitting in a different level of authority that you realize, no, it really didn't get better. It really didn't get better. There was another layer of, let me say, tomfoolery attached to that now I've got to figure out how to work in this. And oh yeah, by the way, I can't remember the last time we got to celebrate an anniversary, or oh yeah, by the way, when was the last time that we were both together to celebrate a birthday, whether it was our birthdays or our children's birthdays, and your honeymoon, right? Like, when was the last time we had an actual romantic vacation that we got to do? And then the last minute change, on the outside, your family's like, oh, that's so great. He doesn't have to go. Yeah, he doesn't have to go, but I can't get my refund. I can't go. There's nothing to do. And I'm so angry right now. And I don't know. And I'm going to yell at him more than likely, but then there's nothing he could have done.
Yeah.
So what do? I just sit in these emotions, and that's not easy.
You mentioned resiliency, and I was thinking that, like, identity, I think, must be part of resiliency, like developing a sense of my own identity.
You were absolutely correct. When you know who you are, when you're solid in your identity, it becomes easier to be resilient. and not just resilient in I know how to check the boxes, because that's robotic, but
Mm-hmm.
resilient in I understand that that blow came, I'm going to process it, and then I'm going to respond. The goal is not to respond out of my emotions, but if I need to yell, kick, and scream, please feel free and do that. Like, get that off your chest. Don't hold on to it. But it doesn't attack me as a person. I understand this is situational and it's not personal. And that allows me the space to respond in a better way. Because, okay, LaQuita, this happened. Now, is that going to change some plans that you have? Yes. So now let me look for the silver lining, and let's respond based on that. What can we do right now in this situation? How can we move forward? How can we make this particular unplanned situation benefit our family? Or how can I make it benefit what I've planned out for myself as an individual? Because the fact of the matter is, sometimes those deployments or field exercises, they came right on time. Like, it was just before I was really angry enough at you not to talk to you for the next 5 months. And I needed that time out. And now you're here in my space. And now how do I process this? Because you're still in my space. Like, it's not always, it's the layers. And when I understand who I am, I can process. It gives me more space to process and not act out of my emotions and have my own set of responsibilities. Is not quite the word, but LaQuita is LaQuita. So whether being deployed or not deployed, I'm solid in who I am, and my life can still continue to move forward. I'll make the adjustment and I can still move forward. Even making the biggest adjustment is in my mental. Like, at that mindset shift, I can make that adjustment. Yes, I had already done all of the mental work to prepare that you're gone. And now you're telling me I got to do that mental work again for when you actually leave. But when I am solid in who I am, then I've cultivated great support systems around me to help me through that. When I'm solid in who I am, I've helped to set up those same support systems for my children. When I'm solid in who I am, I'm able to see clearly that this shift has also impacted my husband the way that it impacted me.
Yeah.
So now how can we be there to support each other? Because just like I didn't want him to leave, he did not want to leave. So now he's got to reprocess all over again. I've got to leave. So he actually would have preferred to just have left on that date instead of having to be back here with the kids longer and have to reprocess that I've got to leave again. Okay, they're telling me we're going to leave in 2 months, but now I've got 2 months here with my family and I got to reprocess again that I got to leave for 2 months. And though we planned that he was going to be back by X date and time, now we've got to replan that. Like, that emotional roller coaster, he experiences it too. He just doesn't always get the luxury of expressing it the way that I do.
Yeah. And I guess, like, as you're talking about it, and I'm like trying to run it through my brain and my own emotional system, it feels like almost like if I know my identity and I have this sense of who I am at the core, then I'm in a very grounded space. I can not be like thrown around by the chaos of military life as much, because I have this strong sense of who I am and how I like to cope in the world, what my values are, how I'm going to respond to things in life. And that keeps me grounded when all of the chaos happens.
Exactly. That my identity is my grounder.
Yeah.
It keeps me anchored because the chaos is going to happen. We cannot prevent the chaos from happening. What we can do as we're building and growing and developing, we can change how we respond to the chaos. And the example that I like to give my clients is this, those of us that cook, or even if you don't cook, you understand that a grease fire should not be put out with water,
Mm-hmm.
but we should smother that thing. as we're getting solid in who we are and we have more mature responses for those situations we have no control over, those more mature responses will cause that fire to be extinguished. Instead of blowing up into the fire that burns down my entire kitchen or my house, I might burn up that pot for sure.
Mhm.
Might even have to replace the eye where the fire started. But you can respond. Your response determines, is this just going to be a little bit or a lot? And yes, we acknowledge that this thing is happening to you through no fault of your own. And yes, this thing is happening to you, and the unit, the squadron, or whatever has absolutely no regard for your family situation. I mean, they might in their hearts, but the mission is the mission and it has to happen, and nobody's going to change it based off of your family situation. Is that wrong? Is that, not right, unfair? Absolutely. We acknowledge that. But now, how are you going to respond? We are responsible for our response because that's the bit that we can control.
Which it sounds like you're saying that starts with having a really deep understanding of who I am at the core.
Absolutely. When you have a really deep understanding of who you are at the core, that gives you an inner strength. So whether it's been female spouses that we've worked with or had the pleasure to meet, or male spouses that we've worked with and had the pleasure to meet, when we don't understand who we are, we tend to gravitate to the identity of what branch of the military we're in, our volunteer position, or our significant other's rank, and or our children.
Right. I'm a parent, or I'm a wife,
Yeah,
versus this
yeah,
is who I am at the core of my being.
Exactly. And that, because you don't have that identity, when something or someone is picking at those aspects of you, it sends you to a really bad space emotionally. Because my husband's lieutenant colonel, whoever, but you're in the same situation as private whoever, spouse. The situations are no different. But if you are associating your identity with that, your significant other's rank, then you feel that those are some exceptions that should be made because my husband is lieutenant colonel or major or whoever, right? Or you're saying, well, I'm just being beat up on because my husband is just a private. No, it's not. They're all in the unit and they all have a mission. So when you know who you are, you don't take those things personally in that way, and you don't wear them. I'm not saying don't wear your spouse's accomplishments as a badge of honor. I think my husband was the best non-commissioned officer the Army ever had. But that doesn't define LaQuita. That defines being. I think my children are the best children ever been born, but that does not define LaQuita. That defines Dario, Devontae, Denise, David, and Marquez. Those are their accomplishments. These are the things that they've done. I'm proud to be their mother. I'm proud to be his wife. But when things are happening to us because of being military service, if LaQuita didn't understand who LaQuita was, LaQuita would have cracked up. LaQuita would not have been able to be there as an anchor of stability for my family.
And that's the part where it's really important for the marriage and for the family unit, is because if I know who I am at my core and I can stay grounded through all of these changes and the roller coaster and everything, then it also improves my ability to be there for my spouse and my family, for them to be able to rely on me. I might even argue that it helps me rely on other people more effectively if I have a sense of who I am.
Yes, because so over the years, I've been blessed to be a part of various family readiness groups, or what we call them in the Army. And some of the groups have been great, some of the groups have not been great. One of the things that I noticed is the ladies and gentlemen who were a part of those groups that have a strong identity and a strong sense of self, they had boundaries. They had boundaries, and their boundaries were non-negotiable. And their response to the bad things that happened was different. They were the more stable, steady individuals in the group that you can rely on for the good advice, to de-escalate a situation. I'll give you an example. So it was during this deployment, and he was a senior non-commissioned officer on this deployment. And so we were working with getting some boxes ready to send downrange. And this was OIF1. We were working to send some boxes downrange. And one of the young ladies in the family readiness group, she did have a really serious situation that happened, but it wasn't serious enough to warrant a Red Cross call to come back. So there were ladies in the group who, instead of offering that steady, stable encouragement that it's going to be all right, what can we do to support? How can we do this? The conversation was just amplifying the problem and talking about how unfair it was. We all get that. We all get that. It's unfair, but let's come up with a resolution. This is happening. We can't stop it, but what can we do to support the spouse as well as support the service member, because he's very aware of this situation now and he feels helpless and there's nothing he can do to change it. So when you are solid in your identity and you're able to provide that steady, stable support that is not reinforcing the negativity that's going on, that's what we need to have in our groups. But unfortunately, when you don't have that identity and you rise to the places of position within the spouse organizations, that cultivates toxic environments.
Yeah. So then there's this community, the way that you can also sort of be of service to the larger military and military spouse community by having a strong sense of your own identity that you can stay grounded in, because the risk is if you don't have that and kind of adversity and trials come, you might emotionally collapse and not really be able to support someone else who is not as grounded in that moment.
Exactly, because no one had bad intentions. But all of the ladies who were not actually being intentions, their intention was to provide support from, we're here for you. But just because their heart was in the right place, they didn't understand that what you're doing is not helping.
Yeah.
What can we do? And so we have to, and that's because, again, their identities have been wrapped up in who their husband is, what their husband does, what my volunteer aspect is here in the FRG. Those are good things. Those do encompass the roles that we play. But however, whether your spouse deploys or not, whether you're able to get 80 positions on the FRG or responsibilities, if we took all of that away from you, who are you?
Yeah.
When you understand who you are, then you can answer that question. Why am I so adamant about the volunteerism that I'm doing with the FRG? What is my goal? Like, why am I doing it? What is my goal? What do I want to accomplish? What is my give back to my military community? What is my give back to the unit, the squadron, or whatever level you are in the FRG system, or, depending on your branch, whatever your branch's version. And I probably should have explained FRG, Family Readiness Group. So depending on your branch, it's going to be called different things. So, why are you doing that? Are you doing it because you're bored? Are you doing it because this is the way you get your sense of self? Okay, if you're saying, I'm doing it because this is the way I get my sense of self, how is that fulfilling you? Are you so consumed in that if I take that away, will you fall apart?
Right. And if you have a strong sense of who you are, you won't fall apart. Do you have tips for people listening on how would they go about, developing their sense of identity and knowing and discovering who they are at their core?
I do. So my first advice with those that are listening When you're, for me, it happened with a trigger moment. And honestly, most people, that's where it starts, unless you have a strong sense of self from a young person. I would highly advise them to either start their journey working with a coach or start their journey working with a clinician, whether it's a marriage and family therapist, if you're married, a licensed clinical social worker that's, counseling, or, a psychologist or something. Start your work there so that you can get a foundation, because when you don't know who you are, you don't know what questions to ask in order to start that journey. But when you're partnered with someone who is open, they have no biases, they can help you to craft out those questions. And as you're going through answering those relevant questions that you're given in those sessions, you really do the work. That person that's partnering with you, whether it's your coach or your therapist, they're there to help you see what you can't see by asking you the questions and allowing you to give the proper responses and having those aha moments. So that's really my biggest piece of advice when people ask me that question, like, what are the tips? What are some of the things that I'm doing? Well, however old you are, when you're having this conversation with me, we haven't had that self-discovery moment on our own, and we probably won't. So for me, I feel that it's safest for someone to start that journey, partner with an individual who is not biased and that can help them walk through that journey by helping them craft out the right questions to ask themselves and to ponder on.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And if I could just like tie in the pieces that you had previously, it sounds like also like these tests that are about your personality might be another step that you could do when you're working with somebody to help identify pieces of this. Like you mentioned DISC and scope.
Test online, and that's good, and they'll give you some results. But without someone there that actually knows how to read the results and how to help you take the results that you have and begin to develop a plan, you kind of just know. But you don't know the depth of what you're looking at and how to use it to help you.
Yeah, they have to be used in conjunction with somebody who is able to use the tool with you. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. And the having that unbiased party is, for me, it's really necessary. That person challenges you to look at aspects of yourself that sometimes we don't want to address. Like that the saying that time heals all wounds, that's not true. Just because I haven't chosen to confront something that that traumatized me, or I didn't understand, or I didn't like, and I move forward, yeah, you move forward in every other aspect of your life except for that one. And that space could be the space that you need to heal and deal with in order to truly understand who you are, or why you are the way that you are, if I can say it like that.
Yes. Yeah. Sort of like we all have blocks to self-awareness. And so then I can't, if I'm blocked in being able to see something about myself, I'm not going to be able to really find it on my own. This is where working with a coach or a therapist or somebody who might be able to see the block or ask the questions to allow the two of you to look at this block to your self-awareness together. That's kind of what you're talking about, LaQuita.
Absolutely. That is the sweet spot. And what I share with my clients when we get to that space is this is the thing. As a coach, I'm not a qualified clinician. So when we find that block, if we touch that block and it's tender to the point where you snatch it back, then that means you need therapy. But if we touch that spot, it is just a little irritation, then I can work with you. Because some healing, because when you have a wound that has a scab, it's an irritation to it, but you can still move on through that.
Yeah.
You'll still press forward. But if it's still raw and open, you might need to seek a little medical attention for that. And so that's where the work of a coach differs from that of a clinician. And so I have to refer you out, like ethically, I have to refer you to someone that can help you, because yes, as a coach and a therapist, can we work in conjunction? We can. But what I found is when people need that therapy, my work as a coach is just taking their money, because until they work with you, what I do is just a cover up.
Yeah, it's like if the wound only needs a Band-Aid, coaching is great. But if you need like stitches or something, then for your heart, right? These are like heart wounds. If my heart is so painful that I need stitches or something like that, that's more in the therapy realm. But if it's not that, so it's not that painful, the injury's not that big, then coaching is a great option. Yeah. So speaking of
Absolutely,
that,
absolutely.
how could people find you and work with you if they wanted to?
So thanks so much for asking. People can go out to my website, which is www.laquitamonley.com, and fill out the contact me form. And it takes you about 3 business days, unless it's over the weekend. You can also reach me on social media. And I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, all under LaQuita Monley.
Great. So we have your website, and people can fill out the contact form. You'll get back to them in 3 days, but if not if it's weekend. And then there are ways to find you on social media and LinkedIn.
Correct. If people connect with me on social media and set their notifications, they'll have access to my lives, and which most of them can see them on my YouTube page.
Okay, great. So there are a lot of ways to learn from you in various formats around identity and things like that. Great. And I'll include all of those links in the show notes for this episode for people to check out.
Awesome. They can also check out my new book. It's called Redefining Success, 8 Tools that I've used to develop a growth mindset. And the book is really about the importance of identity.
Okay.
Because growth and mindset, those are all like, sexy terms people are using in social media right now. But you won't achieve any of those things until you understand who you are. Because how will I have a growth mindset if I don't know who I am? I don't even know where to begin and how to begin. And so I share some tips, tools, and strategies in this, in Redefining Success, 8 tools that I've used to develop a growth mindset. It can be found on Amazon as a Kindle book or as a paperback book.
Okay, great. I'll include that book also in the show notes for people who want like an easy clickable link. So, LaQuita, thank you so much for being on this podcast and talking about identity and how you got into it and how this relates to military spouses and even your own experience. It's just been really great to learn about this from you. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's definitely been a pleasure. It's one of my favorite topics. And, as we were saying even before the show, the military spouse, definitely, we have some unique challenges that others don't have. And it's so easy for us to get caught up in the culture of the military, where our identity hinges on the success of our sponsor, or even if we're employed as, for myself, I've worked NAF, I've worked GS, I've been government contracting. And it's so easy to get caught up in that world to where our identity is determined by the rank you have in the active duty, or the rank that you have as a civilian, or the level of volunteerism that you do, that we don't know who we are at the core. And we find ourselves doing some very unhealthy things in our personal and private lives, because we don't know who we are, because just the way that the military is designed. So that is one of the reasons that is really important. Because I don't want to really say anything negative, because that just happens, right? Like it just happens the longer your significant other is in the military. And the way that the structure of the military is set up through a ranking system, it's easy to get caught up into that, and it's very toxic. not on purpose. It just happened. So when you don't know who you are, you get sucked into that trap, and which can lead to, the alcoholism, the depression. It leads to so many unhealthy things unintentionally, when what you were doing was trying to achieve success, but based off of a structure that's not a healthy structure. So identity is very important for us in the military community, so that we can achieve what we have determined success to be without getting sucked into toxic traps.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Thank you for adding that in. So but we'll end here, but thank you again for being on the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, please take a second to go rate, review, and subscribe so you get all of our future episodes. Make sure to check out the show notes to sign up for our free 10-week relationship email course. This email course is really designed for people who are maybe having trouble with communication or connection in their relationship, and helping them develop some quick wins right away to start improving it. While I am a therapist, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not considered therapy. And it should also not be a replacement for therapy. If you think you need a professional of any kind, you should definitely go find one. Until next time.